Hello everyone. I hope you all are well and safe. Today I and my friend Hardik, we welcome you all in the second technical webinar of our DSC DDU. It's always great to have enthusiastic people around you when you all are having that great enthusiasm to learn something new. So I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate that attitude as always. So let's come to the point. Let's talk about this the session that we have today, that is on the GraphQL. So basically this session will divide into the two parts. The first part will be the introduction of the GraphQL, why it's required. For me, it's a kind of a solution to one problem, or there are problems that we are having. So before jumping into the solution, first we need to understand that what's the problem is there in the REST API. Before understand that what's the problem in the REST API, I suggest that we also have some brief introduction about that, how REST API works, what exactly REST API is and the API. So we will have a great depth introduction about the REST API and the GraphQL. Then in the second part, my friend Hardik will cover the hands-on application, and we build one GraphQL server as well. So you will get a lot of things things in this 1 hour. So I hope you enjoy and you like this live session today. And I know it cannot be that interactive, but we try to make it interactive by the comment section. Like, you post the comments, like just post each and everything that you understand or you like or dislike in the comment section. And another thing, what I believe, it's a conceptual topic to understand. So if you find any problem at any point of time, please comment in the comment section. If you can't understand anything, we'll stop there and we'll try to figure it out, that doubt from you. And that's how we proceed towards today. So I hope it's clear, and we move further towards the slides and the PPT, and have a brief introduction about the REST API and the GraphQL. Okay, so I just start to share my screen. I hope you can share my screen. If you can share my screen, then just please comment so that I can understand that you can see my screen. When I get the confirmation, then I'll start. Yes, I get the confirmation that my screen is available. So as our topic for the today is the GraphQL, the single endpoint. So you get this tagline of the single endpoint at the end of the seminar. So before going into that, first we understand what is the timeline, that what are the topics that we are going to cover in this seminar. The first one that we'll focusing on, that what is REST API, why it's needed, how REST API exactly works, like why we need API first, that we understand the shortfalls or the drawbacks of the REST, and why the GraphQL came into the picture in the 2012, and how GraphQL resolved that, what is GraphQL, and what is the at max potential of the GraphQL, at which extent we use the GraphQL for our web application and make it in a better way, the architecture of the GraphQL. And then after we create one GraphQL server, that's a one application on the GraphQL. So the first side is the what is the REST API and why it's needed. So as we all know, the API, we use API a lot nowadays. The API is nothing but the application programming interface. We use someone else program or the data or the code for our website. Or what is but RESTful API? A RESTful API is an application programming interface that is nothing but the API. We use HTTP requests to get, put, post, and delete the data. We just use this API to get, that is to retrieve those data, to put, to modify that data, to post, to insert or the add that data, and delete, for the deleting those data. In a simple words, we can say that we use the different URLs to fetch data from the server, or we have to do some different kind of operation with the URL. So before understanding what is the RESTful API, we need to understand that why we need API first, why there is a concept of the API. So API is nothing but it's application programming interface. In more precise way, what I can say that just the API is, so what happens in As we all know that in today's world we are well aware of the MVC architecture. There is a MVC structure are there in our website nowadays. So in a backend side, the developers create the API, right? There are a lot of APIs in the backend. Why? So there is only one backend, and there can be a multiple views for that backend. So for website, I use that backend API. So for that, I don't need to write backend API for each and every time. Like for my website, I need to write another backend. For my mobile application, I don't need to write another backend. There will be a one separate backend, and there will be many front end can be worked there. So that is the power of the API. And how can we use that API by these URLs, right? So there is one backend API for my website. I can use that API for my mobile application. I can use that API. So this is how we work, and this is how powerful the API is. For an example, I'll give you example. Just write the www.youtube.com/videos. So just imagine this is on one API. So it will give you all the data, all the videos of the YouTube in a JSON or the XML format, or whatever it is a format that we written in for the API. It's done release nowadays the JSON. So we just get the all information of the YouTube video in our JSON format, and we use that data in anywhere when we need those data, right? So that's a basic concept of the API, and we can do some operation, let's say get, put, post, and delete with the RESTful API with the HTTP request. I hope this is clear, because it is the base on which we are going further. So I hope it's clear. So this is how the RESTful API works. So the first one, the client make a get request or the post request or put or delete request for the REST API, and that REST API will interconnect with the database, and according to our request, that will give you data on your front end side, right? According to your operation, that will give you data first, and that data will utilize in our front end web application, right? So this is how the REST works. Okay. But there are three major shortfalls or the drawback of the REST API that we found is that there is a bulk of endpoints, right? So what do you mean by the bulk of endpoints? So first of all, we need to understand what is the endpoint. There is a what you mean by the one endpoint. So you can say that if there is a one URL is equal to one endpoint, like there is a end of where I can get those data, I can get that data, that is called the one endpoint. So like if there are 10 URLs in your website, if there are 10 API that you are calling from your front end application, that means there are 10 endpoints that you have. So in REST API, what you need to do is for each and every task, for each and everything, you have to call this separate endpoint. For an example, just imagine Facebook, right? So my name is Devanshu Brahmbhatt. So if you want to get information about myself, so you just write the Devanshu Brahmbhatt, like www.facebook.com/Devanshu Brahmbhatt. So you get my all information. So that is called one URL, and that is one endpoint. But if you want my all posts from the Facebook, so /Devanshu Brahmbhatt/post, so you'll get all my posts. Then /friends, so you get all my friends list. So this is how this is called. You can the endpoints. We'll describe each and everything very detailed on the next slide, but I'm just trying to give you some brief introduction about what is the endpoint and all of stuff. Sometimes data overfetching. Now we'll come to the next point, that's the data overfetching and the underfetching. What do you mean by data overfetching? Sometimes we downloading unnecessarily a lot of data. For an example, you want the Facebook API for your front end application where you want to need to display your friend's name. So you just write that your name /my friends, right? Like for an example, you just take my example, like Devanshu Brahmbhatt/friend. For my front end application, I just need to know my friend's name. But when I call that API, it will gives me a lot of information about my friends as well. There are a lot of other things which I get. So that is called data overfetching. I get some unnecessarily lot of data. As well as what is underfetching. Sometimes I need a data, but I can't get that data using only one API. The data which I want For that I need to call more than 2 or 3 APIs, right? So that is called underfetching. And overhead, like we'll come to the third point, that's the overhead of structuring endpoint at the front end. So you have one application where you need to call 10 APIs simultaneously. So for front end, the guys who work on front end frameworks, so it is very hard for them to manage their 10 APIs simultaneously. Like you have to store its data in one variable, and there is a lot of bulky tasks will be there. So these are some 3 things that we'll cover from the next slide. Okay, and these are some drawbacks of the REST API that we found. Now, for an example, there is one example of a blog site where there is one user. So if I call that API, that user slash his ID, so I'll get the information about this user, that you can see about there is a one number is there, and I get there is a response on the right hand side. There is a one API call of slash user ID, right? On the second part, when I call the API of slash user slash ID about this post. So as you can assume that this is a one blogger website. So there is a one user like a name John. So when I need his post, then I just say that user slash John ID slash his post. So I can get the whole data regarding his post. When I want his followers, so I say that user slash John ID slash followers, then I get his all followers list, right? Okay, so this is how the REST API works, as you can see. Now imagine on the right hand side, there is a one like it's not a front end side, but if you imagine that I want to build a one front end website for this kind of data, where I want to display the username with his blogs, with his only title. Like I don't want his blog content, I just need its title and the follower's name, that follower he has, right? Okay, so when I make the API call of slash user ID, I get the ID, name, address, and the birthday. But as you can see on my front end, I just need his name. I don't need his address or the birthday. So this is called the overfetching of data. Actually, I just need his name, but still I'm getting address and the birthday. So which is not there, which is not needed right now for me. Okay. So this is called the overfetching. As you can see that in a post as well, I just need the title of his post, not the content or the comments. But still I'm downloading those data, which is not required at all. So that is called the overfetching of the data, right? Now what is underfetching? So if I just say slash user slash ID slash post, so it will not give me any details regarding his followers, right? I cannot get any other information than the post. So this is called underfetching of the data, right? Because I've for another data which I needed of his follower list, for I have to call another API. So that is called the underfetching data. The one API is not satisfying my all requirements. That is called the underfetching of the data. And what you mean by bulk points? Now we come to the first. As we can cover the second points, the data overfetching and the underfetching, now we'll come to the bulk of endpoints. And what you mean by the bulk of endpoints? As you can see that there is only 3 things basically I needed: the name of that user, the post of that user, and the follower of that user, right? But for that I need to call these 3 APIs on my front end, which is it just should not be there. Maybe many of you think that it's okay to call 3 APIs, but when it comes to e-commerce website or a very big website, that is on one page you have to call 10 to 20 API, then it's not a desirable thing. Like majority on a website or the on a big companies, that always prefer that your whole API call should be less than in 800 milliseconds. So it can't be satisfy that thing. So yeah, so for one thing I need to call this 3 API which shouldn't be there, right? So this is called the bulk of endpoints. The third thing is the overhead of structuring endpoint at a front end, right? So like as I mentioned that if there are 3 APIs, so for front end engineer, he need to store each and every data in a separate variable. On the front end side, he has to call 3 different APIs, and managing 3 APIs, it's quite harder. When it comes like, when it comes to more than 10 to 12 APIs, then it becomes a very difficult for the front end engineer to manage this. So this is the drawback of the REST API that we found, right? So now the question is the how GraphQL can resolve that thing, that will cover in the next slide. So now the main GraphQL came into the picture. So just imagine there is a, we write just one query that the user, I just pass that user ID of John, and I just need his name. So I write his name. I just need his all post with the only title. I don't need any other information. So I just mention I want his post with his title, nothing more than that, right? And I just need his followers of, and maybe I just need his 3 followers. So I just explicitly mentioned that last 3 followers, right, with his name. So I can get those data with the response like this. As you can see that there is a user name Mary, and I can just get get those data with just one API call. There is no other no other burden of the website as well. So this is the concept of the GraphQL. Like what I need, I'll get. Okay, so on the basis of the on the basis of that principle, the GraphQL is worked. I hope it is clear, you guys, and I'll move further. Like still now, if you have any doubt, just please ask in the comment section, so I can answer that. I just wait for a 10 second. If you have any doubts, please um, comment in the comment section. Okay, so I think there is no okay, so I just received that there is no doubts till now, so I'll move further. Okay, things in graph, not in endpoints. Like this is the one great sentence by Lee Bryan of he's a co-inventor. You'll understand this sentence by the end of the slides, so stay tuned then. How GraphQL resolve it? Like as I mentioned, overfetching and the underfetching is the one of the most two important problems that we face in the REST API. At a smaller instant, it might not be like as a big problem, but when it comes to bigger and bigger, it can create a lot of issue in your website. So the overfetching is downloading unnecessarily data, and underfetching is generally that means that a specific endpoint doesn't provide you enough of the required information. The client will have to make additional requests to fetch everything is it needed. As we talk in our blog website, as I take an example, to get requirement which I have, for that I need to call 3 separate API. My one API cannot resolve my all requirements, so that is called the underfetching. So now, what is GraphQL? Okay, so GraphQL is a powerful query language for the API. You just need to understand it's a query language for the API. How we use our API in a more flexible way and more efficient way. What do you mean by flexible way? Like what? Like if I need 2 things in my API, I just use that. On next day, if I need 3 things, then I can do it very easily. So this is what the flexibility that we have. Okay, a GraphQL is a new API standard that provides more efficient and powerful and flexible alternative to the REST. Just 1 second, maybe we got some comments for a doubt. There is one doubt. For GraphQL, we are not using the endpoints. No, we are using, but there will be only one endpoint. I as I mentioned, what you mean by the endpoint is something when you make some URL request. As I mentioned, that if you say that YouTube/videos, right? So you are telling that YouTube API that I want the videos data from my site. But just imagine that you want you've there is one page, On that page you want the information about the videos, you want one creator information, you want that creators all the subscription that he has, you want that all data. So for that you need to call three separate APIs. So that could be say that there is a three endpoints, but what we do in the GraphQL, we just call one endpoint, right? I hope it is I hope you are getting, and if you are not getting much clear, then you will get to understand that when it comes to the coding part, you will get exactly how we deploy the server, how the API and how that endpoint works. But for now we can say that we just call one thing, we just the whole, we just wrap up our old requirement in just one API call, I could say. That would be the answer. When Dhruval Gandhi say yes, then we'll move further. If he has any doubt, then please comment so that I can clear that and we can move further. I'm waiting for Dhruval Gandhi, I guess. Yeah. Okay. I think we should move for. I think we should move further. If there's any doubt, we'll solve when he comment again, I guess, right? Then what is GraphQL? The most application today have the need to fetch data from a server where the data is stored in the database. It's a responsibility for the API to provide an interface to store the data that fits into application's need. So like that's a role for the backends, right? Like backend developer, we create one APIs, like we create different types of API to retrieve different kinds of okay, we just received that, he understood. Okay, that's fine. So that's the rule. That's how the backend developer build the API to retrieve different kinds of data. We build the APIs accordingly. That, so this is the how API works in the real world. We describe that. Then what is GraphQL? Again, the GraphQL is often confused with being a database technology. This is a misconcept. The GraphQL is a query language for the API, not with the database. In that sense, it's database agnostic and effectively can be used in any context where the API used. So what is the mean of that? So GraphQL has nothing to do with the database. It's not a database query language. We are not structuring our database schema according our GraphQL, nothing. We are just fetching our API in a such a way that we want with the help of GraphQL. So we build one GraphQL schema. So according our GraphQL schema, the API will give you the data. That is what the GraphQL is. The developers on the Facebook that have created the GraphQL, they say that GraphQL is a creational implementation. It's a creative implementation. It's not something beyond that. We just creatively implement the GraphQL in such a way that it will fulfill our old requirement in just one API call. That is what it is. So it was like that was the for the very big misconception that we have, the database query language and the GraphQL that we discussed. It was developed and the open source by Facebook, and now it's maintained by the large community of the companies and the individual from all over the world. So just 1 week back, we have one webinar for the open source. So GraphQL is also open source project. So someone who is a great interest in that surely contribute in that. It's a great thing. Now fetching data with the query, like it's now we are come to the coding part in the coding section. Meanwhile, that how GraphQL and the how you can write some code in the GraphQL. So GraphQL has its own system that used to define the schema for the API. The system for writing schema is called schema definition language, that is called the SDL. Here is an example how you can use that SDL in define the type called person. So if there is a type person, the name is string and age is the integer. You will learn very depth like how you write the schema for the API in a coding part. So I'm just leaving it right now. But yeah, all you need to understand from this side that the GraphQL is its own language that is called the SDA, the Schema Definition Language. There are a lot of communities that using GraphQL, like the Coursera, the GitHub, and the Twitter. So yeah, it's a widely it's a widely spread nowadays. Now, here is the comes a very important part of the GraphQL. Maybe many of you think that why it's named GraphQL, like there can be another name, but there is a one big word called the graph. I mean, so why can't we utilize that thing, right? So here is the picture, what is the GraphQL can actually do. So here is an example of book. There is a one book ID one, so just go to that book ID. From my front end application, I just call that book ID one. So I just want his title and genre, and I also want his author name and the age. Okay, but I want his another books. Okay, so what is that exactly? I just call one node of that book ID one, but there is a book number 5 and the book number 2 is it's sharing some kind of similar characteristic that the book one that the book one has. So I can easily retrieving that book 5 and 2 data as well. So when you get some suggestion whenever you are going into e-commerce website, so we can achieve that with the help of the graph. So from the one node that is book number 1, I can easily go to another node that's book number 5, and I can also easily go to book number 2, right? From the book number 5, I can go to book number 2 as well. And as book number 1 sharing a similar nature of book number 5, I can navigate to that author of book number 5 as well. So this is how the graph is whole structure. I can say that when we use the graph, when we want to have a very complex query, very relational query, when you want to that query in your application, we can use the GraphQL for our web application, right? So this is the whole brief introduction about the GraphQL, and you learn a lot things from the coding part, I guess, and you'll implement all of these things from the graph. Now I like to call my friend Hardik for the coding session, I guess, and he will continue from the architecture.
Hey Devanshu.
Hi.
Hello. Okay, so let me just share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone. Is it visible?
Yes, Hardik.
Okay, all right. So this GraphQL server can be implemented in various way, and that we usually called it as architecture. So it has three types of major thing and three type of architecture. So one by one we see. First is normal with connected database. Second is GraphQL server, that is a thin layer in front of number of third party or legacy system, and integrated them through a single GraphQL API. And third is a very complex and hybrid approach. Actually, from my perspective, I believe that third one is very important in the high scale and large scale application, and that's why everyone used GraphQL to avoid the headache of this tedious task of getting and fetching data from the API. Okay, so this is the first architecture. They called it as a greenfield architecture with one GraphQL server that connects to a single database. So here is our client, and we request anything we want, and GraphQL is connected with database. So simply data comes from one function or query, Then it comes picture our API. So API normally connected with that, and GraphQL do our work that we just will see on next 20 minutes. And the second one is only GraphQL server. It is alone and dealing with a different kind of services. It may be third party API, like I am using the GitHub API. I want repositories and all that, so I just simply fetch that from GitHub API through our GraphQL server. Then microservices, any kind of services, legacy system, such a big kind of system we want to use. We want to authenticate through OAuth and other things. Uh, and yes, please, if any second year audience who are not getting this major concept of web development, please ping me. I will go it thoroughly. Okay. And this is the third approach. This is kind of hybrid approach. So what is different between second and third? So they simply, instead of one GraphQL server, they have connected entire uh, server with database and then dealing with the third parties and the microservices. We see in the first that only one GraphQL server is with database. And yes, let me clear one thing, that one confusion, that is this is not a database technology. So it is nothing to deal with any kind of database. It is whether SQL based AWS or NoSQL based MongoDB or CouchDB. You can use any database and any front end technology or any back end technology. This is for avoiding the tedious task of fetching too much of data. And what are we dealing with the REST API that Devanshu has explained. Okay, so this is the third and hybrid approach that most of uh, users use. Okay, okay, so let's jump to the code and GraphQL server. So what we will basically do, it is a very simple task. We will implement first architecture. This is greenfield architecture, basic cliche type architecture. We can say that, but for beginner, it is very much important to understand. We will build a query, then we will see resolver function that we will using. So I love Node.js and JS, and it is very convenient. So we will design our first server with using Node.js. It can be used with PHP, any technology. I just mentioned it. So okay, let me start, and please ask questions. Okay, so I'm ready with my VS Code, and actually I have decided to connect it the database, but I feel that is a second year or third year audience, and many of them, or first year also, so many of them are not aware with database. So I am just applying the raw data and deal with API and GraphQL server. Okay, so basically npm is a node package manager, which will be used to. Okay, so description entry point, yes, this command. Uh, yes, I'm ready. So we initialize our backend with the node package manager's initialize command, and after that we required some kind of thing that is known as packages. Uh, okay, so okay, let me turn on my camera. Oops. Okay. All right. So we have to install some package. So basically, Node has one excellent and awesome middleware server known as Express, which will manage many tasks like to listen to the application, start the server, etc. etc. So we'll install that. Then, of course, Facebook has developed a GraphQL to use their functions, and of course, to integrate Express and GraphQL, a function called Express GraphQL is used. All right. So while it is doing, so this is the Express GraphQL for HTTP server package developed by FB, and now managed by various community. These are the major collaborators we can see. Uh, so basic uh, say root handler or boilerplate code is given, so we will use that. Okay, we are ready with this also. Please ask questions, guys, if you have any kind of query. So this is our main server file, which is responsible for open the port, responding to the queries that client gives, and we simply paste. So let me introduce in brief. So this is the 4000 is port name. We will write one function that will help us to log the request. So console.log server is responding at 4000. Okay. Okay, and this is app.use is a function of Express, as we have written in the fourth line, and slash GraphQL means localhost gem 4000, and after that in the slash GraphQL it will listen to this GraphQL HTTP that we have taken from Express GraphQL package. This is the function of basically Express GraphQL package. So what it takes, my GraphQL schema. So we didn't build any kind of schema. So basically schema in the GraphQL is what we want and what we want to achieve from our system. So we have to simply define our schema that has several documentation and their own criteria. So its name is my GraphQL schema. It already shows, and there is a function build schema. So just look at the third line, it will automatic okay, be upgraded, yes. And so I have decided one small function that of books. I think that will be a nice example. I define one book that is implemented through type book. It has id in the integer, and it has author in the string, and description in the string, genre uh, also in string. Okay, so id, author, and main thing remaining title that is in the string. Okay, so we have defined a schema. As you know, we don't have any database. So, and yes, what we want in the GraphQL, very nice thing called query comes to picture when we have to deal with this kind of thing. And query is what we want. So we have one function that of book that will take id as integer, and that should be not null, and that will give a one book. And if we want more books of same genre, I will restrict it to the only two functions that we have. We want to achieve one book through id, and we want books through genre, and it will be a string, and we cannot write it as books because we get this is a kind of field in the type query. Whatever we write is called a field. So first field is of book, second is of books, and this will give the list. So we have done that rectangular square bracket. Okay, so yeah, that's done. So we have to bring a raw dummy data that I have recently just yeah, this is the data of book. Yes, here I just take it as data. All right, normally we take this data from database. Okay, id, title, author, description, and genre, everything is up running. And these are the two normal function of API that in the rest we write for the get and for post and delete and update, etc., etc. We in the this our API has two functions, that is get book and get books, and it will take args parameter. If it is a get book, then it will take id as argument, and simply compare with each. Okay, please ask me any doubt, guys. Okay, and second is of get books, that is based on the genres, and this is the root function. So basically GraphQL requires some function which our API using. So in our API there is two function, get book and get books. Okay, so we have to provide some root value, that is also a field of GraphQL HTTP server, and that functions we have defined in one variable called root. So we have to not give a separate uh, value for each of the function. Instead of this we just write in one, and then we move further. Okay, so and this root function is also known as resolver because it resolve the queries which we fire on our API. So I think we are up. We are, and yes, let me cover one topic. Yes, this is this field GraphQLi, GraphIQL. This has been true because many of you have worked with REST API. To test our API, we use Postman. That is very good software, or in the Mozilla also we can apply, but we to get more pretty output we use Postman, and Postman has more features than Mozilla or Chrome has. So in terms of API yes. So GraphQL has their inbuilt local tester or debugger, that is called GraphQLi. That is true now because we have not connected front end. We just testing through a raw query and see whether it is working or not. And when comes to a real production, we just simply uh, put it as false, the main server. Sorry, graph IQL. Okay, so server is responding at 4000, so I should test. So this is localhost 4000. If I just type 4000, then it will just give cannot, because our server is responding at slash GraphQL. Okay, okay, so here we go. So let me, this is the fancy Postman of GraphQL, their own reliable debugger called as GraphIQL. QL stands for query language. Okay, and this is the two function we have implemented, query getbook that takes an id and return only title. So this is the basic query, the main query that we are talking about. This is the kind of endpoint that we want, and this will not lead to any kind of overfetching or underfetching, because whatever we want we are just uh, typing it here. I will just provide the title. If I want description also, then I can write the description. Okay. So and this is the query variable. We uh, cannot give a value direct through our code, so they provide a facility that we can specify this dollar id means this is our variable in our field or query, that is getbook. And when we run, it will ask which query, first getbook or second getbook. So we will use first, and it will directly give us on the json format that is separated by commas and written with data in that book title atomic habits, written by James Clear, and description of it. Okay. If we want get books, then we'll also written, but we didn't provide any kind of genre here in the get books. Also we have written this, that it is not necessary. Exclamation mark means necessary, integer is necessary. If we didn't give any integer, then if I run say getbox, then it will throw the error. But uh, say in second function getbooks, I provide, it will give all of the books of all genre. So it is because we have put it is not mandatory. And here genre is kind of self-help books. Self-help book, atomic habits and think and grow rich, that is in our data. So we, in the raw data, we have only three ids of books, that is of atomic habits, long walk to freedom, that is autograph biography. And let me test also that if I just fire one genre, what will happen. Second function, okay, long walk to freedom. All right. So yes, if I fire first function on the query variable genre, it will throw me error because integer exclamation mark is mandatory. So you can customize at your own like this also. And now this is the first greenfield type of architecture, which is connected with the GraphQL and its data base. Okay. So this is the rapid and efficient and also flexible way to get and data from API. From this GraphQL, Netflix, what we are, like kind of get habituated of it uh, due to this lockdown, and also before that also this Facebook also use this kind of mechanism, but they have built at their own, that is called as Falcor. So they have also built this kind of query fetching, because that when bulk of data, bulk of what can we say, yes, bulk of data, and too much of users, too much of like big size file on the Netflix. So just simple REST API cannot handle and cannot give a smooth experience what user uh, needs. Of course, sometimes content is good, but like more buffering and overhead of too much of things happening, we are not satisfied. We want rapid experience. We are greedy users. So this Falcor is also efficient data fetching library that is also inspired by GraphQL and developed by the Netflix. So nowadays GraphQL is rapid growing and growing. Twitter is also using this. many communities are using this. Let me correct this. Okay, so this is the normal architecture. So what we have planned to give a brief and detail about introduction, what is GraphQL, how it is work, and all the kind of that things. I hope you all have learned this. I put in my GitHub if you want this code base. This is a simple server I have created. We can also do high tech, that hybrid program also. I have just recently built one third party uh, authentication with GitHub and all that thing with using GraphQL. I will soon, after debugging, and I will put on my GitHub so that you can also get to learn about the third architecture of greenfield, sorry, hybrid approach that most of uses. Uh, yes, so this is the coding part. So if you have any query, please let me know. I'll wait for say 10 or 15 seconds. Okay, all right. So this is it. We have coded server. We have, I hope, I think from this you have little push, and you will stretch your limits, and you will do more on the GraphQL, research more about it. And one thing that I will want to share is that they have developed recently one tutorial how to GraphQL by Facebook, that is also free, that has given a very good yes this uh, from this you can learn more things. You can choose any technology. Look, this is really cool. You can do GraphQL with Elixir, you can with Ruby, Java, Python, Scala, Go. So whichever technology is suited for you, you just go. And this is with React plus QR. So yes, from this React, many of you have, or some of you have doubt that GraphQL is only for React developers. No, it can be used with Vue.js also. Anything, any front end technology, any database. We just want to deal with the API and get data fast. Okay, so you can learn from this also. And let me, okay, so code, and now this year they cannot held GraphQL summit on their place or in the California state. So they have decided to keep it online, and dates of it is July 30 and 31, August 6, 7. On that they launch many things. They go depth in the GraphQL technology, more feature, whichever bug was in. They will also discuss about that. So and I'll request Devan to please share that link, the summit.graphql.com, on description, so that if you want you can join. It is free online event. You will learn, laugh, and explore with GraphQL community members. Okay. Okay, so that is come to an end. And as I said, this is just basic. Please deep dive into this technology to know more of this potential and power, because this is just robust, because this is on the high tech stack that we are using. Uh, I just mentioned Netflix, because nowadays data is very important in every aspect, and to reach faster, that we all developers do, and always working towards that. Okay, and feel free to ping us. This is the Twitter account of Devanshu Brampat, and I am Hardik Bagda. Thank you everyone from joining us. I think I'll shift a moment to Vivek for conclusion of this webinar. Vivek. Hello, Vivek.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you got to learn a new technologies, and please feel free to contact us if you have any doubts. And you can always reach out to Hardik and Devansu if you have any queries. And still, if you have any queries, then you can just write down in the comment box. We will try to solve your queries.
And yeah, we will share this slide soon.
I guess there are no more queries. So thank you everyone joining us. Yeah. So we are wrapping up this event. Okay. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
yeah.
Bye. So
Bye,
thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.